This is a work of historical fiction, inspired by events during the Iraq War period. All characters and specific events are fictional. The dust never settled in Fallujah. It hung in the air like a brown curtain, mixing with the smoke from burning vehicles and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos pressed her back against the crumbling wall of what used to be a pharmacy, her rifle clutched tight against her chest. The ceramic plates of her body armor dug into her ribs with each labored breath. 3 days ago, her convoy had been moving through the Western District when the world exploded around them. The improvised explosive device had been buried deep beneath the asphalt, invisible to even their most careful sweeps. The blast had flipped their Humvee like a toy, sending Maria and her team tumbling into this maze of abandoned buildings and narrow alleyways. Now, she was alone. Completely alone. The memories came in fragments, the deafening roar of the explosion, the taste of blood in her mouth, the sight of her team leader, Sergeant Rodriguez, trapped beneath the twisted metal of their vehicle. She had tried to pull him free, but the insurgents had opened fire from 3 different positions. The bullets came like angry wasps, chipping concrete and sending sparks flying from metal surfaces. Maria touched the bandage on her left shoulder where the first bullet had found its mark. The fabric was already soaked through with blood, but she couldn't stop to change it. Not yet. Not while they were still hunting her. She had counted the hits. 23 times the bullets had struck her body armor, her helmet, her equipment. The ceramic plates had done their job, absorbing the impact and spreading the force across her torso. But each hit felt like being punched by a sledgehammer. Her ribs ached with every movement, and she was sure at least 2 were cracked. The radio clipped to her vest crackled with static. She had been trying to reach her base for hours, but something was jamming their frequencies. All she could hear was the occasional burst of Arabic voices and the distant sound of helicopters that never seemed to come any closer. Maria peered around the corner of the building. The street stretched before her like a canyon, lined with damaged storefronts and burned-out cars. Laundry still hung from some of the balconies above, a strange reminder that people had lived normal lives in these buildings just weeks ago. Now the windows were dark and empty, like dead eyes staring down at her. She knew they were watching her. The insurgents had been tracking her movements for the past 2 days, always staying just out of sight. They were patient, these fighters. They knew she was injured and running low on ammunition. They could afford to wait. Her water was almost gone. The last of her MREs had been consumed that morning, and her stomach cramped with hunger. But worse than the physical discomfort was the isolation. Maria had never been alone in combat before. She had always had her team, her brothers and sisters in arms who would fight beside her no matter what. Now there was only silence and the weight of survival pressing down on her shoulders. She thought about her daughter back home in Texas. Isabella would be starting 3rd grade soon. Maria had promised to be there for the first day of school, to walk her to the classroom and meet her new teacher. The image of Isabella's face, bright with excitement about learning to read chapter books, gave Maria the strength to push forward. The sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere behind her. Maria froze, pressing herself deeper into the shadows. The steps were careful and deliberate, the movement of someone trying to be quiet, but not quite succeeding. She counted at least 2 sets of feet, maybe 3. Her rifle only had 1 magazine left, 30 rounds to get herself out of whatever was coming next. Maria checked her sidearm, confirming the full magazine in her pistol. She had to make every shot count. The footsteps grew closer. Maria could hear voices now speaking in hushed Arabic. They were coordinating their approach, probably trying to surround her position. She had faced situations like this before, but never alone, and never while injured. A shadow moved across the opening of the alley behind her. Maria spun around, bringing her rifle up to her shoulder. The movement sent a sharp pain through her wounded arm, but she ignored it. Through her scope, she could see a figure in dark clothing moving along the far wall. The shot came from her left. The bullet whined past her ear and struck the wall where her head had been just a second before. Maria dove to the right, rolling behind a pile of rubble that had once been someone's front steps. More shots followed, the muzzle flashes lighting up the narrow alley like deadly fireworks. She returned fire, placing her shots carefully. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and she saw one of the fighters stumble and fall. But there were more of them now. She could see movement in at least 3 different positions. Maria's training took over. She focused on her breathing, on the fundamentals that had been drilled into her during countless hours on the firing range. Sight picture, trigger control, follow through. Each shot had to have a purpose. A grenade landed in the alley behind her. Maria had maybe 5 seconds before it exploded. She sprinted across the street, diving through the broken window of what looked like an old restaurant. The grenade detonated just as she hit the floor, sending shrapnel and debris flying through the space where she had been hiding. The restaurant was dark inside, filled with overturned tables and broken glass. Maria moved carefully through the debris, trying to find another way out. Her boots crunched on something that might have been dishes or might have been bones. She tried not to think about it. Another window at the back of the restaurant looked out onto a small courtyard. Maria could see a well in the center, surrounded by what had once been a garden. The plants were dead now, brown and withered from lack of water, but the courtyard offered cover and maybe a chance to move to a better position. She was halfway through the window when the sniper's bullet found her. The impact spun her around and sent her crashing back into the restaurant. Maria looked down and saw blood spreading across her leg just above the knee. The bullet had passed through the meat of her thigh without hitting the bone. But the pain was immediate and intense. 24 hits now. She was still alive, still fighting, but her body was reaching its limits. Maria tore a strip of fabric from her uniform shirt and tied it around her leg above the wound. The bleeding slowed, but didn't stop completely. Outside, she could hear the insurgents moving closer. They were talking more loudly now, confident that they had her trapped. Maria counted at least 6 different voices. Too many to fight directly, especially with her limited ammunition. She needed a new plan. The restaurant connected to the building next door through a hole that had been blasted in the wall, probably by artillery during one of the earlier battles for the city. Maria crawled through the opening, dragging her injured leg behind her. The next building had been a barber shop. Ancient posters still hung on the walls, advertising haircuts and shaves in Arabic script. The mirrors were all cracked or broken, creating a kaleidoscope of fractured images. Maria saw herself reflected dozens of times, dirty, bloody, but still determined. A staircase led to the 2nd floor. Maria climbed carefully, testing each step to make sure it would hold her weight. The building was old and damaged, and she could feel it swaying slightly in the wind. But the 2nd floor gave her a better view of the surrounding area and maybe a chance to break contact with her pursuers. From the upstairs window, Maria could see the insurgents moving through the restaurant below. They were being cautious now, aware that she was still dangerous despite her injuries. One of them carried an AK-47 that looked newer than the others, probably their leader. Maria lined up her shot carefully. The range was less than 50 meters, an easy shot under normal circumstances, but her hands were shaking from blood loss and fatigue. She controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate slow down. The crosshairs settled on the leader's chest. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the man fall backward, his weapon clattering across the floor. The other fighters immediately took cover, shouting orders to each other. But Maria was already moving. She had given away her position with that shot, and they would be coming for her soon. The building's roof was accessible through a rusty ladder, but climbing it with her injured leg would be difficult. Each rung sent fire through her wounded thigh. Maria gritted her teeth and kept climbing. Behind her, she could hear boots on the stairs. They had found her trail. The roof was flat and covered with a layer of sand and debris. Maria could see for blocks in every direction. The city spread out below her like a brown sea, broken by the occasional column of smoke or the flash of sunlight on metal. Somewhere out there was safety. Somewhere out there were friendly forces who could help her get home. But first, she had to survive the next few minutes. The insurgents burst through the roof access, weapons ready. Maria was waiting for them behind an air conditioning unit that provided some cover. The firefight was brief, but intense. Bullets sparked off metal and concrete. Maria's rifle clicked empty after the third shot. She drew her pistol and kept firing. One of the attackers went down, then another, but there were still too many of them, and they were spreading out to flank her position. Maria's pistol ran dry just as the sun began to set. The sky turned orange and red, painting the city in colors that reminded her of home. She reached for her spare magazine, but her hands were shaking too badly to reload quickly. A bullet caught her in the vest, high on the right side. The impact knocked her backward, and she felt something crack in her ribs. 25 hits now. Her body armor was shredded, the ceramic plates cracked and broken. But she was still breathing, still fighting. The last of the insurgents advanced on her position. Maria could see his face now. Young, maybe 17 or 18. Barely older than some of her students back when she had been a high school ROTC instructor. His eyes were wide with fear and adrenaline. She managed to get her pistol reloaded just as he rounded the corner. They saw each other at the same time. Maria's shot was a split second faster. Silence fell over the rooftop. Maria lay on her back, staring up at the darkening sky. Her radio crackled with static, but she was too weak to reach for it. The pain was everywhere now. Her shoulder, her leg, her ribs. But she was alive. Stars began to appear overhead. The same stars she used to watch with Isabella from their back porch in San Antonio. Maria closed her eyes and tried to remember what her daughter's laugh sounded like. She would hold on to that sound. She would hold on to it and never let go. The night was cold in the desert. Maria pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and settled in to wait for dawn. Somewhere out there, she hoped, someone was looking for her. Someone was coming to bring her home. She touched the small cross hanging around her neck, a gift from her mother before she deployed. "Please," she whispered to the darkness, "let me see my little girl again." The city below was quiet now, but Maria knew it wouldn't last. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But she had survived this long. She would find a way to survive another day. The radio crackled again, and this time she thought she heard something different in the static. A voice, maybe, speaking English. Hope fluttered in her chest like a caged bird. Maria closed her eyes and listened to the night, counting her heartbeats and planning for tomorrow. She was still alive. She was still fighting. And somewhere in the darkness, help might be coming. This is a work of historical fiction inspired by events during the Iraq War period. All characters and specific events are fictional. Dawn came slowly to Fallujah, painting the horizon in shades of gold and amber. Maria had not slept. Every sound in the night had brought her instantly alert. A cat moving through the rubble, the distant rumble of vehicles, the call to prayer echoing from a mosque somewhere across the city. But she was still alive, still breathing, and that counted as a victory. Her wounds had stiffened during the cold night. The bullet hole in her leg throbbed with each heartbeat, and her cracked ribs sent sharp pains through her chest whenever she moved. Maria unwrapped the makeshift bandage and examined the damage. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the wound was starting to show signs of infection. Red streaks radiated out from the entry point, and the surrounding skin felt hot to the touch. She needed medical attention. More importantly, she needed to get off this rooftop before more insurgents came looking for their missing comrades. The bodies around her would draw attention soon enough. Maria checked her ammunition. 4 rounds left in her pistol magazine, and 1 spare magazine with 15 rounds. Not much for what promised to be another long day. She salvaged what she could from the fallen fighters, a few magazines for an AK-47 that she couldn't use, a radio that had been damaged by gunfire, and a small bottle of water that might have been the most precious thing she had found yet. The water was warm and tasted of plastic, but Maria forced herself to drink it slowly. Her body needed every drop. She had been trained in desert survival, knew that dehydration could kill her faster than any bullet. The human body could survive for weeks without food, but only days without water. From her position on the roof, Maria could see movement in the streets below. Early morning in Fallujah brought its own rhythm. People emerging from buildings to check for damage from the previous day's fighting. Vendors setting up small stands to sell what goods they could find. Children playing in the rubble as if it were the most natural playground in the world. But she also saw the hunters, men with weapons moving through the alleys in small groups, searching systematically through each building. They were looking for her, and they were getting closer. Maria needed to move. The building next to the barber shop had partially collapsed, creating a pile of concrete and twisted metal that led down to street level. She could use it as cover while moving to a new position, but climbing down with her injured leg would be dangerous. She started the descent carefully, testing each piece of rubble before putting her full weight on it. Halfway down, a chunk of concrete shifted under her foot and went crashing to the street below. The sound echoed off the surrounding buildings like a gunshot. Maria froze, pressing herself against the debris and listening for any response. Voices called out from somewhere nearby. They had heard the noise and were investigating. Maria could hear boots running on pavement, getting closer to her position. She drew her pistol and waited. 3 insurgents rounded the corner of the building, weapons ready. They were moving fast, probably expecting to find her injured or trapped in the rubble. Maria had the advantage of position and surprise. Her first shot took down the lead fighter before he knew what hit him. The second man dove for cover behind a burned-out car, but Maria's second shot caught him as he moved. The third fighter managed to get off a burst from his AK-47 before Maria's final shot found its mark. The bullets had come close. 1 round had passed through the sleeve of her uniform without touching skin. Another had struck the concrete just inches from her head, sending fragments of stone flying past her face. She counted those as hits number 26 and 27. More voices echoed from deeper in the city. The gunfire had attracted attention, and she could hear vehicles starting up. They were organizing a larger search now, bringing more resources to bear. Maria needed to disappear before they could surround her. The sewer system offered one possibility. Many of the manholes had been damaged by the fighting, their covers blown off or pushed aside by explosions. Maria found an opening 2 blocks away and descended into the darkness below the city. The tunnels were a maze of concrete and rusted metal. Water flowed slowly through the main channel, carrying debris and things Maria preferred not to identify. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of sewage, decay, and chemicals that made her eyes water. But it was shelter, and it offered a way to move unseen through the city. Maria had to crawl through some sections where the tunnels were too low for standing. Her wounded leg dragged behind her, leaving a trail of blood on the concrete. She tried to stay in the shallow water to wash away the trail, but knew it wouldn't hide her scent if they brought dogs. After what felt like hours, Maria found a junction where several tunnels met. A shaft of sunlight streamed down from a grate overhead, and she could hear the sounds of normal city life, people talking, vehicles passing, the ordinary noise of survival. She climbed up to the grate and peered out. The street above was busy with foot traffic. Women in black robes hurried past, carrying baskets of food. Old men sat in the shade of damaged buildings, playing games with stones and discussing the events of the day. Children chased each other between the adults, their laughter a strange counterpoint to the violence that had consumed the city. Maria realized she was seeing the other side of Fallujah, the civilians who were caught in the middle of this war, trying to maintain some semblance of normal life while the fighting raged around them. They weren't her enemy. They were just people trying to survive, same as her. But she also knew that some of them might turn her in if they saw her. Bounties were often placed on captured American soldiers, and poverty made those rewards tempting even for people who harbored no personal hatred toward the coalition forces. Maria moved deeper into the tunnel system, following the main flow of water toward what she hoped would be the edge of the city. Her leg was getting worse. The infection was spreading, and she was starting to feel feverish. Without antibiotics, the wound could kill her, even if she avoided the insurgents. She found another access shaft and climbed up to reconnoiter. This part of the city looked different, less damaged, with more intact buildings and signs of recent habitation. But it was also quieter, too quiet for a populated area. As Maria watched from the shadows of the tunnel entrance, she began to understand why. This section of Fallujah was controlled by different fighters, more organized, more disciplined than the groups she had been evading. She could see sentries posted at key intersections, and the way they moved suggested military training. This was going to be much more dangerous. Maria retreated into the tunnels and tried to think. Her original plan of heading for the city limits might not work if the entire perimeter was controlled by organized insurgent groups. She needed another option, another way to signal for help or reach friendly forces. Her radio had been damaged in one of the firefights, but she still had the emergency beacon in her survival kit. The GPS transmitter could send her location to any coalition aircraft in the area, but using it would also reveal her position to anyone else monitoring those frequencies. It was a risk, but staying hidden in the sewers while her infection got worse wasn't a sustainable strategy. Maria found a position near another access shaft and activated the beacon. The small device would transmit her coordinates for exactly 60 seconds before shutting down to preserve battery life. She hoped that would be long enough for someone to get a fix on her position. While she waited, Maria tried to tend to her wounds. She had a small first aid kit, but it contained only basic supplies, bandages, antiseptic wipes, and pain medication that wouldn't do much against the infection spreading through her leg. She cleaned the wound as best she could and applied a fresh bandage, but knew it was only a temporary measure. The sound of helicopters made her look up. Somewhere above the city, aircraft were moving in a pattern that suggested a search operation. But whether they were looking for her or conducting some other mission, she couldn't tell from her position in the tunnels. Maria decided to risk moving to street level to get a better view. She climbed up through the access shaft and found herself in an alley between two damaged buildings. The helicopters were visible now, two Blackhawks flying a search pattern over the western part of the city. Coalition aircraft, flying low and slow as if looking for something specific. Hope flared in Maria's chest. Someone was looking for her. Her beacon signal had gotten through. But as she watched the helicopters, Maria also saw the insurgents preparing their response. Men with shoulder-fired missiles were taking positions on rooftops. Others were setting up machine guns in windows overlooking the aircraft's flight path. The fighters were coordinating their ambush using handheld radios. Maria had to warn the helicopters somehow. She still had her signal mirror in her survival kit, a small piece of reflective metal designed to flash sunlight as a distress signal. If she could get to a position where the pilots could see her, she might be able to alert them to the danger. The building next to the alley had an exterior fire escape that led to the roof. Maria climbed as quickly as her injured leg would allow, ignoring the pain that shot through her thigh with each step. She could hear the helicopters getting closer. From the rooftop, Maria had a clear view of the ambush being prepared. At least 6 missile teams were in position, with more fighters ready to provide covering fire. The Blackhawks were flying directly into a kill zone. Maria aimed her signal mirror at the lead helicopter and began flashing the sunlight in the standard SOS pattern. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short. She repeated the pattern over and over, hoping the pilots would see the signal and understand the warning. The lead Black Hawk suddenly changed course, banking hard to the left. The pilot had seen something. Maybe her signal, maybe the insurgents on the rooftops. But the second helicopter continued on its original heading. The first missile streaked up from a building 2 blocks away. The pilot of the second Black Hawk saw it coming and threw his aircraft into an evasive maneuver, but the missile was too close. It struck the helicopter's tail rotor, sending the aircraft into a violent spin. Maria watched in horror as the Black Hawk crashed into a building 3 blocks away. Smoke and dust rose from the impact site, and she could see figures moving toward the wreckage. The insurgents were moving in to capture any survivors. But the first helicopter had escaped the ambush. It was circling back now, trying to provide support for its downed wingman. Maria continued signaling with her mirror, hoping to establish contact with the pilot. The helicopter turned toward her position. Through her small binoculars, Maria could see the crew chief in the door looking directly at her. She waved her arms and pointed toward the crash site, then toward the insurgent positions she had identified. The helicopter's machine gunner opened fire on one of the missile teams. The 7.62mm rounds tore through the building's facade, sending the fighters scrambling for cover. But more missiles were being launched from other positions. Maria knew she had to get off the roof. The insurgents would identify her position soon and come looking for the person who had warned the helicopters. She made her way back to the fire escape, but gunfire erupted from the street below before she could start climbing down. A group of fighters had surrounded the building. They were firing up at her position, their bullets chipping concrete and sending fragments flying around her head. Maria counted the impacts: 28, 29, 30 hits on her body armor and equipment. She was running out of ceramic plates. The sound of rotors grew louder. The surviving Black Hawk was coming back, flying low over the buildings. Maria could see the door gunner preparing to provide covering fire for her position, but she was trapped on the roof with limited ammunition and nowhere to run. The insurgents were advancing up the fire escape, and she could hear more fighters entering the building from the ground floor. They had her surrounded. Maria checked her ammunition one final time. 11 rounds left in her pistol. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but maybe enough to buy some time until help arrived. The first fighter appeared at the top of the fire escape. Maria's shot knocked him backward into his comrades, buying her a few precious seconds. But more were coming, and she could hear boots on the stairs inside the building. The Black Hawk swept over the rooftop, its door gunner laying down suppressing fire on the insurgent positions. But the helicopter couldn't land in the confined space, and the pilot couldn't maintain his position much longer with missiles still being fired from other buildings. Maria realized she might not make it home after all. But she had warned the helicopters, possibly saved the lives of their crews. That had to count for something. She thought of Isabella again, hoped her daughter would understand why her mother had to fight. The radio in her pocket crackled with static. And then she heard something that made her heart race. A voice speaking English with a slight southern accent. "Unknown friendly on the rooftop, this is Eagle 6. We see your position. Stay down and prepare for extraction. We're bringing friends." Maria looked up at the Black Hawk and saw the crew chief giving her a thumbs up. Help was coming. She just had to survive a little longer. The insurgents burst through the roof access door just as the sound of additional helicopters filled the air. Maria emptied her pistol at the advancing fighters and then took cover behind an air conditioning unit. The cavalry was coming, but the next few minutes would determine whether she lived to see them arrive. Outside, the battle for Fallujah was about to get much more intense. This is a work of historical fiction inspired by events during the Iraq War period. All characters and specific events are fictional. The sound came from the east like rolling thunder, multiple helicopters flying in formation at low altitude. Maria pressed herself against the rooftop's concrete ledge as bullets continued to snap overhead. The insurgents had taken cover too, recognizing the distinctive sound of an incoming assault force. Through the haze of gunpowder and dust, Maria could see them approaching. 4 Blackhawks flying in tight formation, with 2 Apache gunships providing escort. But these weren't standard Army helicopters. The Blackhawks had been modified with additional armor and specialized equipment. These were Special Operations birds. The lead Apache opened fire first. Its 30mm cannon sent explosive rounds into the building where the missile teams had been positioned. The structure collapsed in a cascade of concrete and steel, silencing that threat permanently. The second gunship engaged targets on the far side of the crash site, clearing a path for the rescue operation. Maria's radio crackled again. "Wounded friendly on Building 7, this is Trident Actual. We are SEAL Team 3, incoming for extraction. Mark your position with smoke if you have it." SEALs. Maria felt a surge of hope mixed with disbelief. Navy SEALs were coming for her. She reached into her survival kit and pulled out her smoke grenade. The bright orange smoke billowed up from her position, clearly visible against the brown buildings of Fallujah. "Orange smoke confirmed. We have visual on friendly position. Stay low. We're coming in hot." The first Black Hawk swept over the rooftop where Maria was trapped, its door gunners laying down devastating fire on the insurgent positions below. The .50 caliber rounds tore through walls and vehicles like they were made of paper. But the helicopter couldn't land on the small roof. There wasn't enough space. Instead, thick ropes dropped from the aircraft's open doors. Maria could see the SEALs fast roping down to the roof next to hers, their movements quick and precise despite the ongoing firefight. They wore full battle gear with night vision goggles pushed up on their helmets, even though it was still daylight. The team leader was the first to reach her position. He was a compact man with steady eyes and the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of combat experience. His uniform bore the rank insignia of a chief petty officer. "Ma'am, I'm Chief Rodriguez with SEAL Team 3. Are you injured?" Maria tried to stand, but her wounded leg gave out. "Multiple gunshot wounds, Chief. I can walk, but not very fast." "No problem, we'll carry you out. Doc, get over here." The team medic appeared beside them, already pulling medical supplies from his pack. He was younger than the chief, but moved with the same professional efficiency. His hands were gentle but quick as he examined Maria's wounds. "Gunshot wound to the leg, infected. Multiple impacts on body armor, possible broken ribs. She's been out here a while, Chief. Needs immediate medical attention." Another SEAL took up a position at the edge of the roof, providing security while the medic worked. Maria could hear him calling out targets to the helicopters overhead. "RPG team in the green building, 2nd floor, machine gun nest behind the white sedan." The Apache gunships responded immediately, their weapon systems precisely targeting each threat. But more insurgents were arriving, drawn by the sound of the battle. Maria could see vehicles racing through the streets below, fighters jumping out and taking positions in the surrounding buildings. "Chief, we've got company," called one of the SEALs. "Looks like half the city is heading our way." "Copy that. Doc, how much longer? Give me 2 minutes to stabilize her for transport." The medic had already started an IV and was injecting antibiotics directly into Maria's bloodstream. He worked quickly to rebandage her leg wound with proper medical supplies. The relief was immediate, the first real medical treatment she had received in days. "Ma'am, what's your name?" asked the chief as he monitored the tactical situation. "Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, 4th Infantry Division. I've been missing for 4 days. "Well, Sergeant Santos, today's your lucky day. We've been looking for you since your convoy was hit. Intelligence suggested you might be dead, but someone in the chain of command wasn't ready to give up." The firefight intensified as more insurgents reached the area. Maria could hear the distinctive crack of AK-47 rounds mixing with the deeper reports of American weapons. The SEALs had established a defensive perimeter around her position, but they were outnumbered and taking fire from multiple directions. "Chief, we need to move," urged one of the team members. "They're trying to surround us." The extraction helicopter came in low, its rotors whipping up clouds of dust and debris. But as it approached the building, a rocket-propelled grenade streaked up from the street below. The pilot saw it coming and pulled up sharply, the missile passing just beneath the aircraft's belly. "Taking heavy fire," the pilot reported over the radio. "Can't maintain hover in this environment." Chief Rodriguez made a quick decision. "We'll have to move to the primary extraction point. 2 blocks north, that schoolyard we identified on the way in." "Chief, she can't walk that far," protested the medic. "Then we carry her. Smith, Jackson, you're with me. We'll provide movement. Turner, you and Williams give us covering fire from this position for 30 seconds. Then follow." The SEALs worked with practiced efficiency. 2 of them lifted Maria between them, supporting her weight while keeping their weapons ready. The chief led the way, moving quickly but carefully through the maze of rooftops and damaged buildings. Behind them, the covering team engaged multiple targets. Maria could hear their precise, measured shots picking off insurgents who tried to pursue. These weren't the rapid, panicked bursts of inexperienced fighters. Every shot was deliberate and accurate. They reached the edge of the first building and rappelled down into an alley. Maria's legs screamed with pain as they moved, but she bit back any sounds that might give away their position. The SEALs were risking their lives for her. She wouldn't make their job any harder. The journey to the extraction point took 15 minutes that felt like hours. They moved through buildings, across rooftops, and down debris-filled streets. Twice they had to take cover and fight their way through insurgent positions. Maria watched in amazement as the SEALs worked together, each man knowing exactly what his teammates would do in any situation. The schoolyard appeared ahead of them, a relatively open space surrounded by a concrete wall. The extraction helicopter was already inbound, escorted by the Apache gunships. But the landing zone wasn't secure. Maria could see muzzle flashes from the buildings overlooking the yard. "Sierra 7, this is Trident Actual. LZ is hot. We need immediate fire support on the buildings west and south of our position." The lead Apache rolled in on an attack run, its cannon raking the insurgent positions. Secondary explosions erupted as the 30mm rounds found ammunition stockpiles and RPG launchers. But more fighters were taking their places, and the volume of incoming fire was increasing. The Black Hawk touched down in the center of the schoolyard, its crew chiefs providing covering fire from the open doors. The SEALs ran toward the aircraft with Maria between them, staying low to avoid the worst of the small arms fire. A bullet caught one of the team members in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. He kept moving, supported now by his teammates. Another round struck the helicopter's armored windscreen, creating a spider web of cracks but not penetrating. They reached the helicopter just as an RPG streaked across the landing zone. The pilot was already pulling pitch, lifting off before everyone was fully aboard. Maria felt hands grabbing her, pulling her into the aircraft's cabin as the ground fell away beneath them. She was safe. After 4 days of constant danger, of counting bullet impacts and rationing water drops, she was finally safe. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she began to shake uncontrollably. The SEAL medic was beside her immediately, checking her vital signs and adjusting her IV. "It's okay, Sergeant. You're experiencing shock. Perfectly normal after what you've been through." Through the helicopter's window, Maria could see Fallujah falling away below them. The city that had been her prison for 4 days now looked small and manageable from the air. Smoke rose from dozens of locations where the fighting continued. But she was no longer part of that battle. Chief Rodriguez sat down across from her, pulling off his helmet and wiping sweat from his forehead. His dark hair was graying at the temples, and Maria realized he was older than she had first thought. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Your emergency beacon. The signal was weak and intermittent, but our intelligence people were able to triangulate your general location. We've been conducting search operations for the past 2 days." 2 days? But I activated the beacon yesterday morning. The chief smiled grimly. "Takes time to put together an operation like this. We had to wait for intelligence updates, coordinate with other units, and plan the insertion. Plus, Command wanted to make sure you were still alive before committing a SEAL team to extract one person. Maria thought about that. An entire SEAL team had risked their lives to save her. Helicopter crews, Apache pilots, intelligence analysts, dozens of people had worked to bring her home. The weight of their sacrifice was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank us yet, Sergeant. Thank us when you're back home with your family." The flight to the coalition base took 40 minutes. Maria dozed fitfully, finally allowing her body to relax for the first time in days. The medic monitored her condition and adjusted her medications, preparing her for the more extensive medical treatment she would receive at the base hospital. As they approached the landing zone, Maria could see other soldiers waiting on the ground, medical personnel with a stretcher, intelligence officers who would want to debrief her about what she had seen in Fallujah, and her commanding officer who had probably given her up for dead days ago. But all of that could wait. Maria closed her eyes and thought about her daughter Isabella, about the promise she had made to be there for the first day of school. She would keep that promise now. She would go home. The helicopter settled onto the landing pad with barely a bump. As the crew chiefs opened the doors, Maria felt warm air flowing into the cabin. The artificial atmosphere of the base, safe and secure, and full of the sounds of normal military life. The SEALs helped her onto the stretcher and accompanied her to the medical facility. Chief Rodriguez walked beside the stretcher, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. "You did good out there, Sergeant. 4 days alone in Indian country, 23 confirmed hits on your gear, and you never stopped fighting. That takes heart." 28 hits, Maria corrected him. "I counted 28. The chief looked impressed. "Even better. Your daughter's going to be proud of you." Maria smiled for the first time in days. "How did you know about Isabella?" "We know everything about the people we extract. Part of the job. 7 years old, likes horses, and wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. She's been asking about you every day since you went missing." The stretcher reached the medical facility, and the hospital staff took over. But before they wheeled her into the treatment area, Maria grabbed Chief Rodriguez's arm. "Chief, those men who died in my convoy. Sergeant Rodriguez, Specialist Kim, Private Williams. They didn't make it out. I tried to save them, but—" "We know, Sergeant. We recovered their bodies yesterday. They'll be going home with full honors. You made sure of that by calling in their position." Maria nodded, tears flowing freely now. She had survived, but others hadn't. That was the burden she would carry for the rest of her life. But she would carry it home, to Isabella, to the life that waited for her beyond the desert and the war. As the medical team prepared her for surgery, Maria thought about the title someone might give to her story someday. Hit 28 times in Fallujah, she still lived. When the SEALs arrived days later, she hadn't fallen. She liked that title. It captured something important about the human spirit, about the refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. Maria Santos had faced the worst that war could offer, and she had endured. She had survived to fight another day, to go home to her daughter, to live the life that her fallen comrades never could. 3 weeks later, Maria walked Isabella to her first day of 3rd grade. Her legs still hurt, and she would always carry scars from her time in Fallujah. But she was alive, she was whole, and she was home. That was enough. That was everything.